Good morning, everyone. This is Brett. Thanks for being here, taking the time this morning. We have a really exciting hour and a half scheduled here with our colleagues from Portland State, Dr. Beth Green and her colleagues, Lindsay Patterson, Callie Lambarth, and Mackenzie Morris. You should have seen the materials that we sent out a couple days ago that they're going to be taking you through today. And if you didn't receive those, please let me know and I'll make sure that you have them. Today's focus, as you can see, is going to be around our data collection and program evaluation process. In just a moment, I'm going to hand it over to the PSU team, and they're really going to lead today's session. As always, we are recording today, so don't say anything that you don't want posted on the internet. And if you have colleagues that aren't able to be here, we'll make sure we get the link out to everyone. For the time being, there will be time for questions and answers and things like that and discussion. For the time being, we're just going to go ahead and keep everyone muted. If you have a question, please feel free to use the raise hand feature and we'll get to you. Or if you want to type a question in the chat box, either send out to everyone or send to us, and we'll make sure that we address all of those as we go along. So with that, I'll hand it over to the PSU team.
Thanks, Brett. This is Beth Green, and I am the Director of Family Support and Early Childhood Research here at the Center at Portland State, and I'm very excited to be leading up this great team working with the Early Learning Division to do the Kindergarten Partnerships and Innovation Grants evaluation. We're going to quickly introduce ourselves. We have a lot to get through today. There's pictures so you can actually see what we look like, or at least what I looked like about 10 years ago. So I'm Beth Green, and I want to introduce the project coordinator, Lindsay Patterson.
Hi, I'm very excited to be working with you all. I know I've spoken with several of you, but I can't wait to get to know some of you throughout the duration of the grant.
Mackenzie.
And this is Mackenzie Morris, and I've spoken to almost all of you through information gathering, and so hoping that today is productive.
And this is Callie Lambarth, and I'm looking forward to working with everyone on this project.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to quickly go through what we hope to cover today, and then we'll start with talking about our evaluation approach and overall plan. Like all of you, we've been running to catch up with this fast-moving train, and so we have had some pieces come out already and some pieces are still under development. But we're going to try to give you sort of our overall plan and approach, and then give you some more details around those pieces that are currently ready to go to the field. So first we'll do an overview of the key evaluation questions that we are responding to in terms of the Early Learning Division and what their data needs are, and hopefully what your data needs are. We'll describe our sort of two-pronged approach to the evaluation, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We'll review the evaluation plan, talk about roles and responsibilities, what you can expect from the PSU team, and kind of what we are expecting from the grantees. We're going to go through the quarterly reporting form, and then we'll talk about next steps and take questions at the end. But again, if questions come up throughout the presentation, feel free to type those into your chat box, and we'll try to address those as we go through. All right, so first an evaluation overview. And actually, we're starting out just reviewing quickly what probably looks familiar to you in terms of the P3 alignment logic model that we have been using and the Oregon Community Foundation has been using, and I believe the Early Learning Division has been using, to really help think about all of the different levels of activities that are happening in these prenatal to grade 3 alignment projects. And this is just a quick example of the way that we're thinking about how the evaluation can map on to what you are doing in your local communities. And as I'm sure you know, one of the big challenges for evaluation is that different communities are doing things at different levels. So some people are doing things that really focus primarily in the systems level up at the top. Some people are doing things more in the educator and direct service professional development kind of level. A lot of people are doing things around family engagement and family involvement, and then some people are doing things that we expect would directly impact children. So we've just given you this as a reminder of sort of, this is our overarching frame for thinking about and trying to map what all of the grantees are doing and what the sort of outputs and outcomes that we might expect to happen at the community level for these projects. All right, so our key evaluation questions, these are kind of what drive our focus in terms of data collection. First, we are looking at what are the short-term benefits and outcomes of the Kindergarten Readiness Partnership and Innovation Grants in terms of improving children's kindergarten readiness. And, you know, we have, I think, a realistic view of how much progress can be made in that particular domain in such a short period. These are one-year grants, which is a very short time frame for really impacting kindergarten readiness. And as all of you know, the actual next round of kindergarten assessment at the state level doesn't happen until after these grants are over. But still, we want to be thinking about that as something that we're focused on. We're looking at benefits in terms of increasing opportunities for shared professional development across the early learning and the K-12 system. So again, building that alignment between the early childhood and the K-12 system. We're looking at family engagement and support for children's learning. How are families engaged in supporting their children's learning to build school readiness and being involved in schools and connected to the learning environment there. And then finally, creating family, school, and community partnerships. Again, that process of really building teams that work together that include parents, early learning professionals, and K-12 professionals. And then the other question that we really are interested in is how can we really learn from what you all are doing that can inform future investments in early learning. I mean, I think there's a reason that these projects are called innovation grants, is because the state wants people to be trying different things and really using this as an opportunity to learn. What makes sense? Where can we really get a good benefit from these kinds of investments? All right. So in terms of our evaluation approach, we're working with Brett, and one of the things we're going to roll out today is a progress report that can provide key information to the Early Learning Division and the Early Learning Council about what you all are doing and what some of the short-term outcomes of those interventions looks like. We want to identify promising interventions and provide more in-depth evaluation in specific areas. This is going to our two-level approach, which I'll talk about more in a minute. So in other words, some things are going to happen across all grantees, some things are going to happen across all grantees who are doing particular kinds of activities, and some things are only going to happen for specific projects where we really want to take a closer look at what's happening. We hope that we're going to implement feasible data collection strategies. Feasible, meaning realistic and not overly burdensome at the sites, we hope. We also have as a goal to help local grantees build capacity for evaluation and hopefully to integrate some of our tools into some of the existing data collection procedures at your local sites. And then finally, we're hoping to align the evaluation and data collection with other efforts to strengthen the early learning and K-12 systems. So some of you also have OCFP3 grants, and you'll notice that our team is similar and our approaches are similar, and some of these data collection tools are similar as well. So we really want to align some of that data collection that's happening across these different efforts. Okay, as we move forward, I just want to emphasize that communication from us and from you and to Brett and from Brett is really important. We know that a lot of the work that's happening on the ground is emerging, that things are shifting and changing from day to day. And so we have already, as Mackenzie noted, had a lot of conversations with you kind of about what your timelines are, what your plans are, and we know that those can change over time. So it's just really important, and I want to emphasize, if we send out an email asking for information, or if Mackenzie's trying to get a hold of you to talk to you about what you're doing, we hope that you could be as responsive as possible given how busy you are. We will also be providing opportunities for you to give us feedback on some of the tools, and so if you, and we always open your comments and questions via email or just pick up the phone and call one of us. We really have a team approach, so in some ways it doesn't matter which one of us you email or call. We'll get you to the right person to give you the answer as fast as we can. Okay, right. All right, so as I mentioned, our basic approach, and this is to have sort of a two-level approach to our evaluation, with level 1 being things that are collected in the same way across different sites. And so we will go through some of the required data and reporting for sites that are doing these kinds of activities. So we might say, if you are doing transition to kindergarten programs, and those of you who were doing them in the fall know that we worked hard to get this piece up and running really fast. We have some cross-site data that's already happening around those activities. We're also looking at some cross-site data related to shared professional development and family engagement. The fourth piece is providing tools so that you and the state can understand the extent to which you're reaching high-risk children, families, and communities, which is one of the driving important things behind these grants. And then also looking at systems change and how you're doing that alignment piece at systems level. So anything that says sort of level 1 means that we're doing the same kind of data collection across grantees. Now, if you're not doing one of these activities, so if you're not doing transition to kindergarten programs, you wouldn't have to collect the data related to kindergarten transition programs or report it. So you'll see that as we go through the progress report later, that they're set up so that if you are doing this kind of activity, then provide this information. If you're not doing that kind of activity, you don't need to provide the information. Okay. With the exception of level 4 and 5, everyone's going to be participating at some level in systems evaluation and in looking at data and thinking about data in a way that can highlight the effect of these projects on targeted populations. Okay. The second level of evaluation really has to do with trying to be responsive to this quest for innovation and being able to take a deeper look at some specific projects that are happening on the ground. And what we've said in our work plan is that we're going to pick 2 grantees who are doing kindergarten transition programs to do more in-depth evaluation, 3 grantees doing family engagement strategies, and 3 grantees doing professional development activities. Wait, I'm just going to stop there. And I just want to give you a little bit more information about why, if you want to go back, yeah. So if you are selected to be part of this level 2 evaluation, we hope that it will be A, not burdensome to you, B, you'll have the opportunity to get some more detailed information about what you're doing, and we will be working closely with you to develop a reasonable evaluation strategy for that project. We are working with Brett to identify the programs that will be part of this level 2 evaluation, and it's kind of a combination of factors that lead to making a decision about which programs to include. That includes things like the state's level of interest in really having a little bit more concrete data in something, the extent to which the programs or approaches seem like they might be something that could be replicable in other communities, so we want to be able to document their effectiveness, or that they're something that we really want to learn more about and really begin to understand, is this novel approach something that's worth thinking about making more investments in. So it's a number of factors that go into determining which projects we'll be identifying for that, and then of course we will be in conversation with you as we move forward in that selection process. And we actually have already the 2 grantees that are going to be working with us on the kindergarten transition piece, which are High Desert, Frontier, thank you, which is doing the home visiting project for kindergarten students, and Yamhill's Ready for Kindergarten program. And we don't have the other ones identified as yet, so stay tuned. Okay.
All right, so now let's talk a little bit more about what the evaluation will look like for each of the different kinds of activities that Beth has already talked about. So as Beth mentioned, we'll be conducting evaluation on kind of 2 levels for most of the P&I funded activities that you're all engaged in. And again, not all of you are offering programs and activities related to all of these different aspects that we're looking at. So some of you won't be focusing on kindergarten transition activities, and for that reason you won't be required to collect data on this or report on these kind of activities. Also because not all of these tools that we'll mention today are applicable to all of you, we're going to review the data collection tools in more depth with specific groups of grantees that are doing these activities. And so hopefully we can offer some more one-on-one and additional support outside of this webinar for each of the tools. So at level 1 within kindergarten transition activities for grantees that are doing this kind of programming, we're asking that you collect a couple of different kinds of information. So we hope that you track which families participate in kindergarten transition programs, and that's for all kindergarten transition programs, regardless of whether they're kind of a one-time thing or a multi-session class. And then for the transition programs that are more ongoing, meaning that they have multiple sessions or classes, we ask that you collect more information related to the demographics of children and participants that are part of that program, and you can do this through a demographic survey that many of you who are doing kindergarten transition programming have already seen. And then we also have an additional survey called the Kindergarten Readiness or Transition Parent Caregiver Survey that we hope tracks some of the potential short-term outcomes that are related to the programming offered. And then at level 2, we're going to be working with both Frontier and Yamhill to conduct focus groups with parents that are participating in the home visits at Frontier and the transition programs within Yamhill, as well as conduct interviews with some of the implementation staff at both of the sites.
I was just going to jump in real quickly and just note that for those who don't know, the Frontier Early Learning Hub is Grant and Harney counties out in the eastern part of the state. And maybe you guys already said that, and if so,
no, thank you. No, thanks. All right, so in terms of the family engagement activities, at level 1 for grantees who are offering different kinds of family engagement opportunities like events or workshops, we're asking that you collect some similar information to what's collected in the kindergarten transition programs, and that's first to track which families participate in these kinds of activities and events, and that's for all family engagement events, regardless of whether it's multi-series or kind of a one-night activity or event. And we'll offer a kind of a sign-in sheet for you to utilize to track these families, but as you'll see in a minute, that is optional if you have other ways of collecting that information. And then for family engagement activities that are ongoing, we hope that you can collect demographic information about the children and families participating through a demographic survey that's specific to the family engagement activities, and also assess kinds of outcomes, short-term outcomes that might be related to the programming that you're offering, and that's through the family engagement survey. And that's really meant to be broad so that it can apply to all sites that are doing family engagement activities. And then at level 2, when we want to look more in depth at 3 grantees who, as Beth mentioned, have yet to be determined, we're hoping to conduct focus groups with parents that participate in some of the ongoing workshops and events, as well as conduct interviews with some of that implementation staff, just so we know kind of what's going on in the field, how are the programs being implemented, and what are families and children and staff getting out of those activities.
And Lindsay, I just want to interject one thing. This is Beth. Just to reiterate that these different tools that we're talking about here, We're not going to go through those today on this call, but we will have follow-up webinars or conference calls where we go over those tools in more detail with the grantees who are going to be collecting that data. And I also want to say, if you're selected as a Level 2 grantee, we really will want to talk to you as well about what you would like to learn and what you think is important to evaluate about your program. So you'll have those opportunities to provide input and as we develop the evaluations for those Level 2 projects.
Great, thanks. All right, so moving on to shared professional development, we're hoping to learn more about what kinds of professional development opportunities are offered at all different levels, so including the leaders and administrators in your D&I project, as well as teachers and early childhood providers. And that can happen through events and workshops and classes and even different kinds of learning communities that are set up within each of the projects. So for grantees that are conducting activities around shared professional development, we're hoping again that you track information about who participates in those professional development events, potentially through a sign-in sheet that we can give out to you. And then for professional development activities that are more ongoing, so again, these multi-session or multi-series events, we're hoping that you collect information around basic demographics of children that might be impacted by the work through a demographic survey. And again, this is really basic information about children who have direct contact with some of the teachers and early childhood providers that are participating in those shared professional development activities. And then also we'll have a professional development outcome survey, which is under development here, and we're hoping that you can give that out kind of at the end of the shared professional development ongoing series. And at Level 2, for those that more in-depth look at some of the shared professional development activities going on in 3 sites, which again have yet to be determined. We're hoping to, again, conduct focus groups and interviews with professionals participating in the professional development opportunities and interviews. Through this, we're hoping to focus on both the implementation of the professional development support and look at some of the outcomes that might be a result of those activities. And we know that many of you are targeting specific groups of children and families through your work in the Kindergarten Readiness Partnership and Innovation Grants. And for this reason, we've asked you to report on these groups using some of the evaluation tools that we'll provide to you. So the demographic survey and some of the other surveys that are all part of your kindergarten transition, family engagement, and professional development activities. And all of this information will be reported through your quarterly progress report, which we'll review in a bit. And we'll also delve into some of the work you're doing around targeted groups of children and families through the key stakeholder interviews. And this is really where we're going to get more in-depth information about who you're targeting and how you're targeting that group, and what kinds of things are being used to support specific groups. And we'll conduct those stakeholder interviews in the spring. All right. And then finally, as Beth mentioned, we're focusing evaluation attention on different types of changes that are being made in the early learning and K-12 systems. And we're hoping to do this in a couple of different ways. So we'll conduct interviews with key stakeholders participating in each of your projects to get more information about kind of those systems changes. And then we'll also ask any grantees who have established already or are working to kind of create a governance structure around P3 to distribute a survey about their collaborative structures, processes, and procedures to kind of gauge how well the collaborative structure is functioning and where are some areas of improvement. So here's an overview of the evaluation plan in kind of a more straightforward table format. And I want to mention that in the materials that Brett sent out, there's a handout that's even more detailed than this. We have added information about the data elements that will be required to collect and report on through the progress report, as well as an additional column with dates of proposed data collection.
And if you have, I'm sorry, if you have the handout, it's a little bit easier to see than the slide.
Yes. So maybe we can briefly walk through this overview of the evaluation plan. In the first 3/4 of the table, we break down the evaluation focus by the areas that we are focusing on in the evaluation. So if you're doing kindergarten transition programs or family engagement activities or shared professional development and establishing a cross-system collaborative or group, we provide more information about the kinds of data that you will need to collect, as well as both required and optional tools. And I do want to note here that all of the data is required to be collected. We have some required tools that are more geared towards finding outcomes for those specific activities, and then we also have optional tools that you can use. We know that some of you are already planning to collect this type of data like demographics and tracking participants, and so if you have your own system for doing that, that's totally fine. If you don't have a system for doing that, you can use these optional tools. And then we have information on where that data should be reported. A lot of it should be reported in the progress report, and then some of those outcome surveys, we're in the process of developing a place to report that. And then because some of these tools are still under development, we have a column here for when the tool is expected, when it's going to be available. So in the first few lines under the kindergarten transition program, for example, you can see that we are hoping that you collect information around transition program outcomes, as well as demographics of children and families that are participating, and those are for ongoing kindergarten transition programs, and you can kind of see that in that very first column. We have the two different tools. The Kindergarten Transition Readiness Parent Caregiver Survey is required, whereas the Child Demographic Survey is an optional tool, but again, that data is required to be collected. There are just several different ways you can do that. A place to report that data, so the demographics will be reported in the progress report, and as many of you know who are already working on kindergarten transition programming, those tools are already available. So at the bottom of the table, kind of the last quarter of the table, we include more information about evaluation activities that all grantees will be involved in, which include both the stakeholder interviews and, as we've been alluding to, this quarterly progress report that Mackenzie will talk about next. All right, so let's move on to kind of giving you some general timeline information as to when you would expect to collect the data. And do note that the matrix or the handout that you have in front of you should include this information integrated into the table that we just looked at on the last slide. So as you can see, grantees offering kindergarten transition programs have already started to collect some of their data, particularly if they're working on these programs in the fall, and will do so through next June. Data collection under the Engaging Families and Shared Professional Development will begin shortly, and of course, we don't expect you to be able to collect that information until after we provide you with the tools to do so. And then in the spring, we'll be collecting more information and data from key stakeholders through the interviews, as well as the collaboration survey if you have any specific governance structure that you're establishing. And I do want to note here before we move on that we absolutely do not expect that grantees go back and retrospectively or retroactively collect data. If you've already done some kind of shared professional development activity, we wouldn't ask you to go back and ask participants to fill out that child demographic survey or that outcomes survey. Instead, we'll just say that moving forward on October 1st, once we have these tools available for you, that we can collect the data at that point in time. Okay, so It doesn't look like we have any questions thus far, so I will turn it over to Callie to talk about the roles and responsibilities.
Okay, thank you. So we've tried to outline what we consider our role, the PSU team, and then also what we consider to be the grantees' role and sort of where those connect. So first, I'll describe the things that we as the PSU team will be doing to support, to implement the evaluation plan with you all. So first, as we've been describing, we're developing and we will be providing data collection tools to you all for these areas that you're working on. And as Lindsay mentioned, there are some tools that will be required based on the activities that you're doing. Some tools will be optional, but the data that are collected through them are also required. So that's what we'll go over further. In subsequent webinars as well, we'll introduce those tools. We will be providing tools for data summary and reporting to you all. So there's a Google data entry forms, which we will be developing. So we don't have those to share with you today, but just know that that's something that we're looking at. And that Mackenzie, in a bit, will be walking through the quarterly reporting form that will be due each quarter. We will be supporting you all on data collection and reporting, so we'll be doing that cross-site, and then we'll also be providing a little more in-depth technical assistance to the grantees that are doing the Level 2 evaluations in each of the 3 areas. We will also be providing reports back to you all and to the ELD on the key findings and lessons learned through each of these efforts. So then what we consider to be the grantees' role, so what you all are doing, what we're asking you to do is to provide information and feedback to us. So for example, when Mackenzie is reaching out to you to clarify some of the activities that you might be doing in each of the areas, for you to be able to clarify what your plan is and maybe if there are changes over time to help us understand what the work includes. To collect required data through Google data entry forms, which again, we'll get to down the road, but don't have anything available at this time. To complete and submit the quarterly report each quarter. And through the quarterly report, to share successes, challenges, and lessons learned, but also that those kinds of things can come up in ongoing webinars, questions to the team, and so on. So I think at this time, Mackenzie is going to spend a little bit of time walking us through the quarterly reporting form.
Great. Thanks, Callie. Okay, so first we'll go over the general structure for the reporting form. So this will be used to report your P&I or KRPI, whatever acronym you've come up with at your site, activities quarterly through this progress report in those categories of systems level activities, professional development activities, and family and children activities. So within each section are a number of yes or no questions, narratives, and or tables to report your activities during each reporting period. And make sure that you're only reporting activities that occurred during that reporting period and were funded by your P&I project, which also includes any blended funding activities that are also occurring. The questions, there's required questions in bold on the reporting form, which feel free to bring that up in front of you, but I will also be bringing it up shortly to review through the webinar. And the optional questions are labeled. So, and tables, there are 3 tables throughout the reporting form that capture specific data about activities, which I'm going to walk through here shortly. 2 of those tables are for professional development activities, and 1 is for tracking family engagement or kindergarten transition activities. For all of these tables, the comprehensive list of those data points can be found in that data collection matrix handout. And then, so for the narrative questions, we're asking you to keep those brief, and the narrative responses can be short and include bullet points or summaries. And just to note again, this has been mentioned before, but just to emphasize that for this first reporting period, we're not asking for any retrospective data collection, and just to include as much data that you have at this point. And I also want to say thank you to Early Learning Hub in Marion County, the Early Learning Multnomah, and the Lane Early Learning Alliance, and High Desert School District for providing feedback on the quarterly reporting form. So we'll go ahead and bring that up now. It'll take a little bit of maneuvering on our part.
I just want to reiterate Mackenzie's thanks to the folks who took the time to give us feedback on the progress report, and we did make some changes based on that feedback, which I think really improved the progress reporting, and actually are taking some of those suggestions to our P3 progress report as well. So we really want you to know that we try to listen and be responsive as we can to the feedback that you give us.
Great. So this should look familiar if you've had a chance to look at it before the webinar or looking at it now. So this first section, we're asking for you to include all the key stakeholders who are involved in your P&I project, to list that there. And then we'll just go through all of the categories. So we have systems where you can track alignment of standards and integrated data systems, professional development for leaders, educators, and service providers. And there's that first table and that second table that I talked about, which I'll go through shortly, and then relationship building between professionals. And then this last section around families and children, where you can track family activities, and that family activity tracking table, which I'll also go through, the communication with families, parent-caregiver leadership, access to services, early kindergarten registration, and transition plans, and then any other P&I project work that you're working on. So this first table on page 5 that I'll scroll up to is to track your professional development activities, and I'll just go through this briefly just to cover the instructions, and then go through each column to specify what we're looking for. So PSU has created tools that we've referred to the Optionate tools in order to gather the necessary information to populate all of the tables. These are optional, so if you decide to gather that information in a different method that works for your site, feel free to do that. And each activity that is given in the reporting period will populate the rows, and if there's more than 2 professional development activities during the reporting period, go ahead and copy and paste those rows at the bottom of the table to make it longer. So you'll fill in the name of the professional development activity, the content areas that are covered, if it was working with specific groups, and then the number of participants represented by sector. And again, our sign-in sheet that we've provided and will provide as a follow-up to this webinar has these, mirrors these sectors if you decide to use it, and then your total number of participants. And a special note for this column to make sure if there's a multi-session professional development activity to only track the attendance for those participants who attended at least 1 session, so not duplicating attendance here. And then the last column that's asking how the professional development was delivered. So for example, I would just type in here, professional development learning community, and clicked on we're improving classroom instruction and child development learning through that professional development activity. We didn't really target any specific groups, so I'll leave that blank. We had, let's say, 2 preschool teachers, 1 director from a center, 2 kindergarten teachers, and 1 principal. And I'm going to say this is a workshop or class series, and
just on the total.
Oh yes, thank you. And so we had 6 total. Thanks, team. And I'm going to say we had 3 over the course of that reporting period. So that completes that table for professional development activities. And so this next table, we're looking at the estimated children impacted through professional development activities. And this table is only for ongoing multi-session professional development series and should only be filled out for educators or service providers or staff who have direct contact with children as a main component of their professional role. And this information can be collected through the Professional Development Child Demographic Survey, which will be provided as a follow-up to this webinar to those sites who decide to use it. And then also as a side note, to find info on the tools that we provide that are linked to the tables, you can reference the data collection matrix or the quarterly reporting form instructions that will be sent as a follow-up as well. So again, the name of the professional development activity should be entered here, and that should match table 2A1, the table on page 5. And then the estimated total number of children impacted will be entered here, and that's the number of children that are in contact with those professionals in their role, and then that number broken out by age range. So if I was to use the example that I used before, I would enter in my name of the activity here, learning community, and let's say that there was 10 kids in each of the pre-K classes and 20 kids in each of the K classes. I already did the math ahead of time. And here, let's see, we've got our pre-K kids and our K kids. So that's how that would be filled out.
And Lindsay, I just want to add to that, part of the reason that we're making this effort to track the number of children who are potentially touched by this is because I think at the state level, especially from the Early Learning Council and other funders, there is quite an interest in being able to show how many children are being sort of touched by this investment. So that's why we're asking you to collect this particular piece of data.
Thanks, Beth. All right, and so this last table that we're looking at is the family activity tracking. And for this one, it's going to be similar to the other tables where we're asking you to fill in an activity per row and add additional rows if there's more than 2 activities provided during that reporting period. And so you'll fill in the name of the activity, the type of activity, and the focus. For a number of participating parents and caregivers, we're providing a family activity engagement sign-in. If you decide to use that, if you have other ways to track the number of parents and caregivers that were present, go ahead and use that. And again, for those multi-session activities, we're asking for the unduplicated attendance for participants who attended at least one of those sessions. And for a number of estimated children, we're looking at the total number of children under 18 years old in each of the family's household, which can be collected using the family engagement sign-in that we've provided. Again, for multi-session only, we're looking at the primary languages represented and the total number of children impacted from each racial ethnic background. And those can be collected through the family engagement child demographic survey that we provide, or another way that you decide to track those certain demographics. And again, we're looking at, like Beth mentioned, a way to be able to track who's being impacted by the activities that are being provided. So as an example, I would put the early literacy workshop here, and this is a one-time event. And we're looking at language and literacy, and let's say there was 20 parents there, and between each of those parents had between 1 to 4 children, for a total of 43 children estimated impact. Great.
Can I just add one thing in real quickly? I just want to note on the last column there where we're asking for demographic information based on race and ethnicity, those are the same subgroups that are used by the Department of Education for its reporting purposes. So we wanted to make sure we were aligned with that, although we recognize that that is not that these categories are not by themselves sufficient to capture the full gamut of the racial and ethnic diversity of our state. But just so you know that there is a rationale for why those are the specific categories that we're using.
Great.
And I just want to also quickly add that as you're hopefully seeing, we are making every effort to provide you with the tools you need to be able to report everything that's in these reports, unless you already have a way of collecting it yourself, which is fine, as Mackenzie keeps saying. With the exception of the descriptions of the activities, and we assume that you will be keeping track of that, so in terms of what was the focus of the activity and that kind of information, that you'll be able to report that because you know what those activities are doing in your community. So you'll see that information about the activities also on the data collection matrix, which is the only place where you'll see that we are not providing a tool. So I just wanted to call that out.
So like I've mentioned before, that we are providing reporting document instructions for additional assistance on completing the quarterly report if you have questions, and it lays out everything that's being mentioned in the webinar, and also reports on the coordinating documents that we've provided if you decide to use them. So this document will be sent as a follow-up to the webinar, and again, the required data points that need to be collected and reported can be found at the data matrix. So really our hope is that you'd be able to use that as a checkbox when each of the activities is happening, to communicate with your partners or your key stakeholders that may be delivering these activities what information you need in order to fill out those tables. And these are the quarterly reporting form due dates. These can also be found on the first page of the quarterly reporting form. Again, no retrospective data collection is expected for any data elements that you have not collected for this first reporting period. We know that that for the project period of July through September is ending soon. To do the best we can, we know that you didn't know.
And I just want to make one final comment about the quarterly reporting, which is there are plenty of places in that report for you to provide narrative, both about your successes and your challenges. And I think we're not looking for extensive narrative there, and I'm looking for Brett to back this up. But I do want to emphasize that we're not just looking for successes, that especially in projects like this that are really cutting edge in terms of what we know and what works and what works best, sometimes you really learn from the things that didn't work. And so we're hoping that you feel free to share those challenges and share, you know, we tried this and it really didn't work, and now we're going to try it this way, and share those learning opportunities as well. Is that right, Brent?
That's absolutely correct. I think it's sort of built into the fabric of an innovation project that there are going to be unanticipated challenges and obstacles. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, some of the things that you all are proposing to do in a year's time, as I'm sure I don't need to tell you, is really quite ambitious. So we want to, of course, be as supportive as possible. And where there are roadblocks and challenges and things that don't go exactly according to plan, that's really important for us to learn and capture that, because that's so critical for the potential of the strategies that you're putting in place to be replicable and to be scalable. So, you know, I know that the tendency is to sort of bury the things that don't go well, but I would definitely, you know, 100% agree with what was said about wanting to know where those challenges lie.
Great, and I think Callie is up next to talk about planning for next steps.
Right, so we've had a chance to review the quarterly reporting form and the overall evaluation plan, and so now what we hope and look to you to do is to go ahead and take a look at the data collection tools that we provide and to review the quarterly reporting form, and knowing too that we will have additional tools that are still under development that will be available, and that we will get those to you as they are available. But really, to begin thinking, if you haven't already, around knowing now, hopefully a little bit more clearly what the expectations for reporting are, thinking about what data you already are collecting and your processes for those data collection, and then thinking about, well, what other data collection forms from us do you think that you'll want to use and will need? Two, to be thinking about how to collect some of these data if you aren't already building that into some of these processes around professional development or family engagement activities. And so to start thinking about how you might build that in. And again, all of those pieces, that's part of our role to help with, helping you figure that out and develop a plan as well. We'll be providing some additional instruction around how to do data entry for some of these tools that we'll be providing, and to use the data summary tools as well. So those are some pieces that will be coming up in the future, but they will be coming, and so that you can look forward to those in the probably not too distant future. For us in our work with you, we will be asking, again, to verify some of the funded activities so that we can determine which forms will serve your needs. And so we'll be sending out emails to you all to confirm in each of the areas, again, sort of around family engagement, professional development. So please be as responsive as you can to those requests so that we can get the tools to you as quickly as possible so that you can begin using them for activities that are beginning in October. And all along, please note, I think Beth mentioned earlier that we're taking a team approach to TA, and so Lindsay Pedersen is the main contact. She will be sending, you've received the TA request form in the email earlier this week. Please send those to her, however. She'll be collecting those, so for any immediate TA questions and concerns that have come out of this webinar, send those to her, and we'll be planning to address them. And other feedback that you have on the process of data collection, implementation, please include that in the quarterly reporting form. It looks like there are some questions and comments coming up in the chat, so I think we have the opportunity to take a look at those.
Yeah, I think this is the first one. So the first question we see has to do with professional development activities that are taking place in early October, and this is according to the reporting due dates. Would I turn the information in about those activities by January 15th? And the answer is yes. So the progress report that we'll ask you to have turned in by the end of October will be for activities through September 30th. And then the second part of the question is, what do I do about the first report if we don't have any of our activities underway yet? And I think that's where the narrative piece of the reporting comes in into play. That's a section to share some information about the planning work that has happened and the cross-sector collaboration that has happened, and how, in this case, if we're talking about shared professional development, how you got all your ducks in a row with all your different providers and schools to be able to get everybody in the same place at the same time. What else would you like to add to that?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Other questions? I think we covered a lot of information, so we may have just overwhelmed everybody.
So from a process standpoint here, there's a few things we could do. One, you could type your question into the chat box. Two, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Or three, you could type into the chat box, unmute me please, and let me know who you are. We found from experience it doesn't work very well to unmute everybody all at once, but we definitely want to make sure you have a chance to chime in.
It looks like there might be something under that first question in the chat.
So there's a question that's saying, am I understanding correctly that the TA report form was already emailed by Lindsay?
Did you happen to send that out in the email with the webinar materials? Yes. Yeah, okay. So hopefully on Monday you received an email from Brett with the webinar materials. That TA request form was part of that email.
So if you go back and look at that email and you don't see it as an attachment, let me know and we'll make sure we get it to you. The next question is, if some of our professional development funds are paying for attendance at the early years to early grades conference, do we record that even if we aren't actually offering the professional development?
I mean, I would say yes to that. I'm looking at Brett, because it seems like you're not providing the PD directly, but you're providing the opportunity to participate in the PD. So if you're sending folks to a conference or workshop, then I would think that that would fall into what would be reported.
Yeah, absolutely, and particularly if there's a coordinated effort to be bringing a team to, a cross-sector team to the conference, and it, really lines up with what it is you're trying to accomplish with the grant, then absolutely, I would agree with that. So there's a question here that says, for race, ethnic background, multiracial should be broken down in the main race, ethnic categories as well as total. Is that right?
I think the idea was that if you have families that are multiracial, that you can just select that box instead of marking each of the boxes above. With the total number of children, yeah.
We're trying not to get any duplicated numbers through multiple, like if you decide you have a form that has check boxes and more than one box is checked, you would then record that information under multiracial rather than duplicating those numbers across.
Okay, the next question is, would home visits be tracked as a family engagement activity?
I think it depends on the purpose of the home visits. I mean, a home visit could be done, for the purpose of preparing parents or children for the transition to kindergarten, in which case it would be a kindergarten transition activity. If the purpose of the home visit is to engage the family in supporting children's learning at home, then I would call that a family engagement activity. So we can have some more. This is from Early Learning Multnomah. It looks like if we need to have more conversations about exactly how to categorize that activity, we can do that. But does that make sense? So think about what's the primary purpose of those home visits.
And I think now that we've kind of collapsed the family and child sections, that we're hoping that all of those activities are tracked on the one family activity tracking table.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay, for that. Yes.
There's very recent changes to the reporting form.
All right, what other questions, folks? I know we've put a lot of information in front of you in the last hour.
I also just want to note that we've tried to break out the reporting form in terms of the major chunks of activities that we saw in your applications. But we also know that some of you are doing some things that really won't fall into any of those categories, so that's why you have the place at the very end of the report. If there's anything else that we haven't covered that you haven't been able to report on, you can put it there. Other questions?
Okay, well, we're not seeing any additional questions come through, so we'll do last call for questions in that case. And before we close, I just want to express my thanks for you all taking the time to participate in this webinar this morning. I know you all have very busy schedules, and I appreciate you making these a priority. I also want to say that for me, from my standpoint, this work around evaluation and data collection, this is in no way an add-on or something additional to the work that you're doing. To me, this is very much an integral part of the work that you're doing, and really front and center. And I think it's really so important for the purposes of the grant and for being able to move forward and make the case that this is important work. So it looks like we did just get one last question. Says our professional development sign-in sheet has to have certain information for stipend and reimbursement purposes. I would love to see your sign-in sheet as soon as possible so that we can work on combining the information.
And I think we can get that to you today, so I can send that to you, Lisa.
Wonderful, thanks. The last thing that I'd like to say, and then I'll be quiet, is just thank you to you all here at PSU. I can't tell you, for those of you who are listening on the phone, how much work this team has done in a really, really short amount of time, and we're really fortunate to be working with them. I just so appreciate it, so thank you all.
Thank you.
And as always, as questions arise, please feel free to get in touch with us. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up.
Thanks, everyone. We look forward to working with you.